Good morning. As you well know by now, this first Sunday in November is a special day known as All Saints' Day. All Saints' Day is an opportunity to give thanks for all of those who have gone on before us. It's a time for us to celebrate our history, what United Methodists call the tradition of the church. From the early days of Christianity, there is a sense that church consists of not only living believers, but all of those who have gone before us. For example, in the 12th chapter of Hebrews, we find that the author encourages Christians to realize and to remember that there is a great cloud of witnesses that surrounds and encourages us, cheering us on. John Wesley, the founder of our Methodist faith, enjoyed and celebrated All Saints' Day. In his journal entry from November the 1st, 1767, Wesley calls it a festival that I truly love. In studying Wesley, we will find that in his theological method, he has four interrelated guidelines: Scripture, tradition, experience, and reason. By tradition, we mean all that has gone before us in the Christian church. And we are part of a long history that goes back through John Wesley to the early days of the church and to the apostles of Jesus. On All Saints' Day, we remember all of those, famous or obscure, who are a part of the communion of saints that we confess in the Apostles' Creed. We tell stories of these saints who've gone to glory. And the writer of Hebrews means by talking about these saints who've gone to glory as anyone or everyone who has been faithful to Christ in their mortal lives. So alongside the likes of Paul from the New Testament, Augustine, Martin Luther, John and Charles Wesley, we tell stories of the grandmother who took us to church and who nourished us. We talk about the pastor who prayed over us during our times of struggle and trial, or maybe while we were in the hospital. The Sunday school teacher who took us under their wing and loved us. The neighbor who changed the oil in our car and helped us when times was bad, or the church that brought food when we didn't have anything to eat. Retelling these stories grounds us in history. These memories teach us how God has provided for us through the generosity and sacrifice of those who have come before us. The stories of saints encourage us to be all that God has created us to be. So I hope you'll bear with me for just a few moments, and I'll try not to bore you, and I hope I don't insult, and I hope you realize that I probably have left some people out. As I talk about some of the things that are dear to me in this church. You see, with my gray hair, I'm not 39 anymore. I've been around a little while, and I've experienced a lot of different things. And one of the things that I've learned is that it hasn't been just one single person that's brought me to where I am in my Christian walk. It's been a whole lot of people and a whole lot of experiences. And these saints who have gone on before that have been a part of this church are very important to me. And as this opportunity came up, I thought, well, I don't know if I'll ever get to do it again, but there are people I'd like to remember There are people that I'll probably mention that some of you will know and some of you won't know. There are contributions that have been made that we really don't know everything about, but they've been made. And we're here today, and this church is here today because of contributions and the things that have been done. So I'm going to name some things and talk about some things, and please bear with me. But I hope it brings back some memories, so when you go to light a candle, it'll refresh your mind, and you'll give thanks for what has happened and what we've gone through. But first of all, of course, I in my walk must mention my father, Joe Sr., who came to church here, who was active here, and who, after he retired, liked to work around the church and do certain things. And he was a man of tradition. He taught us to go to church every Sunday. We went to see our grandparents on a regular schedule. Tradition was an important part of his life, and I give thanks for that and that remembrance of him. As I came to Lebanon in my early years, I cannot help but talk about A.K. Little Doc Gilmer, a man that had a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of love for this church, a wealth of tradition. He was my Sunday school teacher, and at a young age, he kept us all intrigued by what he was going to tell us and the things and the experiences that he had been. Some of those experiences I just laugh. I talk and I think about. I remember one that maybe may not be so funny, but as we stop and think about it, because we don't realize the circuit, but it was funny. He talked about, as a young boy sitting back in the church, and there was an elderly gentleman who had who would nod off during the service, but then the suit coat had the long tails to it, and so he and maybe Giles, I don't know, his brother, would reach up under, took a clothespin and reach up under and took that tail of that coat and pinned it to the leg with a clothespin, and then all of a sudden hollered fire. And the guy jumped up going down the aisle, going like this. And he loved those things. He loved to share that joy that he had. I still can remember and thinking, as I got older, would I be able to do what he did? I still remember seeing him reach on Sunday morning in his pocket, and the kids coming and taking candy, and they searched him out. And they looked for him because they wanted to see him. A true witness of the beauty of this church. And then I think about Sonny Fugate. I have great memories of Sonny, Betty's husband and Bert's father. We had many a talk. He was a great mentor. I was a young family man at that time, and Sonny was a little older than I, and we had many a talk. Many a time he'd tell me in my Sunday school class that I had repeated his phrase 2 or 3 times, and I really shouldn't be doing that. But I miss his smile. I miss the joy. And the memories of those who were strong in this church, who financially took care of it, who directed the leadership. People like Dr. Gilmer, Dr. Giles, and Sue. People like A.C. Fuller, who was a banker up the street, who was the finance chairman, I'm sure, for years and took care of the offerings in this thing. Jack Bondren, a lawyer and later became a judge, who had a very compassionate heart. As a young man buying a home, I went to Jack and I talked to him, and Jack said, I'll help you. And he did that. He didn't charge me near what he should have charged me. He said, you go to church with me. He said, you just keep coming to church. And he took care of things. And I remember him in later years in his leadership as chairman of the pastor-parish relations and the guidance and the things that he did. Miss Vera Gilmer, can't help but remember her, lived up the street. She talked about the days of this church when there was no pavement, when there'd be a wedding going on and the rain would come and the mud would get in the wedding dress would be soaked with mud. Things that happened years before that gave us a tradition, that gave us some thought about what this church was really all about. George Ben Whited, a man who was the principal of the high school that you learned to fear as a child, as a young person. You knew you had to do what was right, but he did what was right because he loved his community and his church. And then I remember him in later years and visiting with him and seeing a compassionate man that I didn't see before. But he brought things to me. Bill Hendricks, a local businessman that gave me some opportunity to work as a young man, but he was involved in this church and he was concerned about the financial part and the leadership. He took his role. He did those things, and that's why we're still here today, because he was one of those leaders. Guy Finney, who had the funeral home across the street. Bernice Quillen, I remember her well. I used to laugh when Bernice would come in to church, and she wanted to be on the 5th row back where Joe's sitting. And if you were sitting there and she came down the aisle, she stood till you moved over. But and I used to laugh about it and wonder about it, but you know what? It was tradition. That's where the Quillen name is on the pew. That's where she felt comfortable in this church. That's where she felt, and that's where we all look to see if she was here. Tradition, sure, but today I look at it. She respected the church. She wanted to be a part of the church, and she wanted that tradition thing. Bill Campbell taught us all how to be ushers. I remember him well in his kind and gentle way. And then we had these people who were leaders in Sunday school. Mike's wife, Jenny Altizer. Jenny was always doing something with the Sunday school classes, and we were having some kind of cookout or something at the house or some restaurant or something that she wanted. She felt always that leadership, always that desire to have fellowship one with another, always with a pleasant personality. And in her years of sickness, she handled it with such dignity that the influence was there. Franklin Gilmer taught Sunday school, and what did he do? I remember Mike and I talking one time. I know he went through the Bible at least 6 times, teaching classes and stuff. He loved to teach. He loved to sing. He loved music. And there was a lady here by the name of Mary Wilson that she moved on to Roanoke. But Mary would take some of us young couples and young people, and she wanted to go to Perkins on Saturday night, or she wanted us to go somewhere and to eat with her and to do that. But she brought about that cohesiveness because she loved the church and the people of this church. And then I remember, as the choir was here, people like Nancy Quillen, who came and during her sickness and gave. And of course, Sarah, and I'm not mentioning the ones that we've talked about this morning that we've dedicated. And then there was James McReynolds. And who can forget James McReynolds? He loved to sing. He loved to be out front in the men's choir. He had a vibrance about him that you just couldn't help but like and admire. And then I laughed. This was an area where it was a little bit comical, and not comical, but it's just I don't know exactly how to describe it. It was a Sunday school class that happened downstairs that Miss Conley had. And that group of ladies pretty well, that in Miss Conley's Sunday school class, you better not move the furniture, you better not do this, you better not do that. You better keep things intact because they liked it. And that was Miss Conley and Luella Vickers and Blanche Campbell and Carrie Warner and that group. But yet they loved the Lord. They loved the tradition. They loved what they had. They came here on Sunday and they enjoyed that tradition. They enjoyed being a part of this church and it being what they wanted it to be. And then we've got pastors who've gone on. Beecher Dunsmore, remember him well. And Rich Humphreys. And then, of course, I put with him Frank Finney. Frank was a fellow who took care of the preachers a lot of times. He'd take care of taking them golfing or I remember with Don Nation, Frank kept him at the fishing hole most of the time. A special person was Frank. Very gentle, very kind. And then there's those people who were, you don't always have to be overly involved or leadership or whatever, but just to be here, to be involved. And there's those people who always seem to be there to support. I think of Marion Turner Gilmer. Loved Mary to death. Of course, Mary and I had the same birthday. Not the same year, but the same birthday. She was younger than I am. But she always would always share that. And we always shared that. But it was something. She was always so kind and so gentle. And Turner, I still can remember his laugh. He wasn't as outspoken, he didn't say, but he was always special. Hazel Davidson, I remember her. And I remember that smile. I still can see the smile that she portrayed when she met you and when she was here. Tom Hunter, and how Tom loved nature and how he did his bird work and how he liked to share that with groups and individuals. With Jim Gregory, and how Jim loved to have Alan play in a band, and he could dance and do things. He was very outgoing and very friendly. He was a great neighbor, and I loved him. Others that I could mention, Dr. Sam Catron and Nancy, always there, always supportive, always doing those things that would help us. And we lost some young people. There's some saints that are out there. Ryan McLaughlin gave his life. Giles Gilmer gave his life. Other young ones that passed before their time. But it's an inspiration to remember they were a part of this body. They were a part of this church. They came and they worshiped and they did. And rather than me just go on and go on, I've got to remember Elizabeth Gillespie. How could I forget Elizabeth? And her love for this church and her love for the church as a whole. And she loved to go to conference. She'd been all that work she'd done. She loved everybody. And she was a joy to be around, a joy to see, even in her latter years. And last but not least, a man that I learned to love and respect and enjoy. And I can see him in that throng on the other side, and that was Ted Slack. A man who loved the Bible, a man who was always friendly, a man who went to nursing homes and played and sang. He loved to sing. And I still can remember teaching Sunday school and a chord would hit Ted, and Ted would break out and start singing the old Rugged Cross or whatever. But it was special. I hope that what I'm telling you and what I've said that you agree with. And there's many other stories that you have. Mine's just been one highway. Everybody has a story to share and to tell. And remember that telling these stories of what has happened to us in this church and how important it is, whether you're new or whether you've been here longer than I have, it's still important because these stories ground us in our history and in our tradition. I ask you to remember this. Tradition is what we make it to be. We make our own. If we're here every Sunday, that's our tradition. If we're not here, that's our tradition.